The crystalline spires of the Galactic Combat Academy pierced the violet sky of Nexus Prime like frozen lightning bolts. Jake Cooper stood before its iridescent gates, his worn leather jacket and casual stance a stark contrast to the ornate architecture surrounding him. 15 years of Force Recon experience had taught him to appear relaxed while noting every detail, including the dozen hidden weapon emplacements tracking his movement. "Quite the welcome committee," he muttered, catching the shimmer of adaptive camouflage as another security team tried to flank his position. Earth's high gravity had given him muscles that could tear through steel, but it was his brain, honed by millions of years of predator-prey evolution, that made him truly dangerous. The massive gates hummed with energy as a delegation of alien masters emerged. Their ceremonial combat robes rippled in impossible patterns, each fold representing centuries of martial tradition. At their head walked Master Valrix, an 8-limbed being whose species had spent millennia perfecting the art of simultaneous multi-directional combat. Human Jake Cooper, Valrix's translator, rendered their harmonics into English. "Your kind are not welcome here. This is a place of refined combat art, not the brutish violence of Deathworlders." Jake smiled, the expression carrying none of the submission the aliens might have expected. "With respect, Master Valrix, I think you might learn something from a species that had to master combat just to survive breakfast." A ripple of offense passed through the assembled masters. The Kulari weapon master, whose crystalline form sparkled with barely contained fury, stepped forward. "You dare mock 10,000 years of combat refinement? Our youngest initiates spend decades mastering single forms that look great in demonstration but fall apart under pressure," Jake interrupted, noting how the Kulari's crystal segments shifted in patterns that telegraphed their next move. "Real combat isn't about perfection, it's about adaptation." The council whispered among themselves, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching with indignation. Jake could read their body language. Another gift from evolving on a world where missing subtle predator cues meant death. They were preparing to dismiss him. That's when he caught the faintest whisper of displaced air behind him. The Academy's most celebrated assassin, a void monk whose species had mastered the art of moving between moments of time, had materialized for a surprise attack. Their neural blade, designed to shut down any nervous system in the galaxy, was already in motion. Jake didn't even turn around. His body, operating on instincts honed by Earth's merciless evolution, simply wasn't there when the blade passed through where his spine had been. He completed his casual stretch, using the momentum to slide precisely 2 inches to the right. The Void Monk's attack hit nothing but air. Before they could recover, Jake's elbow had already found the precise nerve cluster that their species used for temporal control. The assassin collapsed, their time-bending capabilities temporarily stunned by what appeared to be a simple reflexive movement. The council fell silent. "Here's the thing about humans," Jake said, helping the stunned Void Monk to their feet with genuine respect. "We don't spend centuries perfecting single techniques because our planet never gave us that luxury. Every morning, our ancestors had to wake up and survive against things that had bigger teeth, better claws, and deadlier venom. We became good at combat because the alternative was extinction." Master Valrix's upper limbs twisted in what Jake recognized as their species' expression of reluctant curiosity. "And what do you hope to learn here, Deathworlder, if you are already so capable?" Jake's eyes reflected the light of Nexus Prime's 3 suns. "I'm not here to learn your combat arts, Master Valrix. I'm here to show you how they can evolve. Because that's what humans do best. We take what works, improve what doesn't, and create something new, just like our ancestors did every time they faced a new predator and lived to pass on their genes." The gates of the Academy began to open, their crystalline structure singing a harmonic that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years. The tone of challenge, of change. The Deathworlder had arrived, and nothing in the galaxy's martial arts would ever be the same. The evaluation chamber hummed with ancient power, its walls lined with holographic recordings of combat forms perfected over millennia. Jake stood at its center, surrounded by a semicircle of alien masters whose combined combat knowledge spanned dozens of centuries. Their disapproval was palpable. "Begin with the forms of flowing death," Master Valrix commanded. "Zhirkath Master Shivan will demonstrate." A being composed of silvery liquid metal stepped forward, their form rippling with deadly grace. Shivan had spent 4 centuries perfecting just the opening stance of their species' infamous execution art. Their liquid metal body could form blades sharp enough to split atoms, and their neural network could process combat movements 1,000 times faster than most organic beings. "Observe, human." Shivan's voice rippled like mercury. "This sequence has never been mastered by any species outside our own. The neural requirements alone." Jake's eyes tracked every movement as Shivan began the demonstration. Where the alien saw sacred forms, he saw efficient killing moves. Where they recognized ceremonial positions, he identified optimal striking angles. His human brain, evolved to spot patterns that meant the difference between life and death, was already breaking down the sequence into its fundamental components. Shivan's liquid metal body flowed through 57 precisely calculated positions. Each stance could sever a different combination of vital organs. The final form, a complex spiral of razor-sharp appendages, was meant to simultaneously strike 37 lethal points. "Now," Shivan said with smug confidence, "attempt the first basic." Jake was already moving. His body flowed through the entire sequence, not with the liquid grace of the Zhirkath, but with something more primal, more effective. Where Shivan's movements were perfect, Jake's were practical. He didn't just replicate the forms, he improved them. Impossible. Shivan's surface rippled with shock patterns. The neural mapping alone should take years off. "You're thinking too hard," Jake interrupted, completing the final form with a slight modification that made it even more lethal. "Humans don't need to map every neural pathway. We evolved to learn through doing. Our bodies naturally find the most efficient way to move." He demonstrated again, this time adding a simple Marine's hand-to-hand combat technique that doubled the sequence's effectiveness. "See, your form targets 37 lethal points. By adding this basic elbow strike, you can hit 52. Less beautiful, maybe, but more practical." The council erupted in shocked whispers. Master Valrix's upper limbs twisted in complex patterns of distress. "This is unprecedented. The forms of flowing death are sacred, passed down through." "That's your problem right there," Jake said, falling into an easy-ready stance that could transition into any of 8 different killing moves. "You treat combat like a religion. Humans treat it like evolution. We keep what works, discard what doesn't, and always adapt." Shivan surged forward, their liquid metal form bristling with blades. "You dare to improve upon perfection. Let us test your barbaric modifications against." The attack never landed. Jake's body, operating on instincts honed by millions of years of survival, had already analyzed, adapted, and countered. He flowed through a combination of Zhirkath forms and Marine Corps combatives that left Shivan immobilized, their liquid metal form frozen in mid-strike. "Notice how I used your own momentum." Jake helped release the stunned master. Humans learned that from watching Earth predators. We had to understand combat on an instinctive level because everything on our planet was trying to kill us. We couldn't spend centuries perfecting single forms. We had to learn fast or die. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of ancient power. The masters looked at each other, their various alien physiologies showing different signs of the same emotion. Fear mixed with dawning comprehension. "Perhaps," Master Valrix said slowly, "there is something to be learned from the Deathworlder's approach after all." Jake smiled, already seeing dozens of ways to improve the other combat forms displayed on the chamber walls. "That's another thing about humans, masters. We never stop learning or teaching. Should we continue?" The holographic recordings flickered, as if sensing that their ancient forms were about to evolve. The Academy's combat analysis chamber buzzed with excitement. Word had spread quickly about the human who mastered the forms of flowing death in minutes, and now hundreds of alien students pressed against the observation barriers, their various sensory organs straining to witness what would happen next. "Explain, human," Master Valrix demanded, gesturing at the holographic replay of Jake's modified combat sequence. "How does your species process complex movement patterns without the required neural meditation cycles?" Jake rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of Earth's evolutionary gifts. "Ever watch a human child learn to walk, Master Valrix? In about a year, they master balance, coordination, and dynamic movement that would take most species decades of training." The Kulari weapon master floated forward, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of skepticism. "Walking is basic motor function. This is advanced combat theory." "It's all connected," Jake interrupted, moving to the center of the chamber. "Humans don't separate basic movement from combat movement. Our bodies are always ready for fight or flight. Watch." He launched into a sequence that seamlessly blended 5 different alien combat styles with basic human movements. Each transition flowed naturally into the next, creating something entirely new. The chamber's combat analysis systems struggled to categorize what they were seeing. "Impossible." The Kulari's crystal segments chimed in distress. "You're combining the spiral strike of the Void Monks with a basic boxing combination." Jake completed the sequence with a simple 1-2 punch that somehow amplified the void energy. "Humans developed thousands of combat styles because we had to fight everything from bears to each other. Our muscles don't just remember movements, they understand them." He gestured to the stunned alien students. "Your teaching methods focus on perfecting individual forms. Humans learn through application. We don't memorize positions. We internalize principles." To demonstrate, he called up a hologram of Earth's deadliest predators. "See how a lion pounces." Humans didn't spend centuries developing pouncing techniques. We watched, understood, and adapted. Our bodies naturally recognize efficient movement patterns because missing them meant death on Earth. The chamber's AI projected a complex analysis of Jake's movements. Master Valrix's upper limbs twisted in astonishment as they read the data. "Your neural pathways. They're creating new connections with each repetition. You're not just copying the forms, you're evolving them." "Exactly." Jake flowed through another combination, this time incorporating elements of 3 different species' sacred combat arts into a devastatingly efficient sequence. Humans don't learn combat moves. We learn combat. Every movement is potential combat movement to us, because that's how we survived. The Void Monk he had disabled earlier materialized beside him, their temporal displacement fields humming. "Then demonstrate true adaptation, Deathworlder. Match my time-step technique." The monk's form blurred as they executed their species' most sophisticated combat art, literally fighting between moments of time. Their neural blade traced patterns that existed in 4 dimensions. Jake didn't try to match the technique exactly. Instead, his body moved with an instinctive understanding of timing and space that left the monk striking at empty air. Each movement was a perfect counter, not because he could step through time, but because his human nervous system could predict and react faster than the monk could shift temporal positions. "How?" the monk demanded, their blade passing through another afterimage. "You cannot perceive the temporal shifts." "Don't need to." Jake caught the monk's blade arm in mid-shift, using their own temporal momentum to lock them in normal time. Humans evolved pattern recognition that borders on precognition. We don't see where you are. We see where you're going to be. Had to develop that trick to hunt animals faster and stronger than us. The chamber erupted in excited chittering and harmonic resonances as the alien students witnessed physical proof that combat techniques they thought required centuries to master could be not just learned, but improved upon in minutes. Master Valrix raised all 8 limbs for silence. "It seems," Jake Cooper, that we have gravely underestimated your species' capacity for combat evolution. Perhaps it is time to test your adaptability against our more advanced techniques." Jake smiled, his muscles already analyzing and adapting to new movement possibilities. "Bring it on, Master. On Earth, we have a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' And humans, we're really good at it not dying." The Academy's ancient combat arena thrummed with tense energy as Jake faced his seventh opponent in rapid succession. The traditional masters had designed this endurance test to expose the limitations of human adaptation. Instead, they were witnessing something that defied their combat theories. Jake wasn't getting tired. He was getting better. Impossible. Master Schwann's liquid metal form rippled with agitation. His reaction speed has increased 12% since the first bout. Neural fatigue should have set in hours ago. Jake ducked under a quantum phase blade strike from his current opponent, a four-armed HFY warrior whose species had spent millennia perfecting the art of fighting in multiple probability streams simultaneously, where the alien's movements were precisely calculated to strike across parallel realities. Jake's responses were pure instinct, and somehow more effective. "That's the thing about human combat stress," Jake said, turning the HFY's multi-dimensional attack against itself with a simple hip throw. "We don't just endure it. We thrive on it." The HFY warrior crashed to the ground, their probability matrices scattered. Jake helped them up with genuine respect before turning to face his next challenger. Sweat gleamed on his skin, not from exhaustion, but from his body's natural cooling system, another gift from Earth's harsh evolution. "Adrenaline," he explained to the bewildered masters. "The more you push us, the stronger we get. It's how we survive being prey animals long enough to become apex predators." The arena's combat analysis systems were going haywire trying to track his performance metrics. Each fight wasn't just showing different applications of the techniques he'd learned. The techniques themselves were evolving, becoming more efficient, more lethal. Enough. The Kulari weapon master crystallized into their combat form. "You dishonor our sacred arts with these crude modifications. Face me, Deathworlder. Let us see how your barbaric adaptations fare against true mastery." The crystalline master launched into their species' ultimate combat form, the thousand-facet death dance. Their body fractalized into geometric patterns designed to attack from every conceivable angle, each crystal face a perfectly honed killing edge. Jake's pupils dilated, his human nervous system kicked into overdrive. Where others saw chaos, his pattern recognition abilities, honed by millions of years of spotting predator movements, saw opportunities. His muscles, burning with accumulated combat stress, responded faster than conscious thought. He flowed through the Crystal Master's perfect geometries like water through rocks. Each movement incorporated elements from his previous fights, the Void Monk's temporal strikes, the Exarathi's probability manipulation, Schwann's liquid precision. But they weren't just combinations anymore. They were something new. "Watch his neural patterns," Master Valrix called out, their upper limbs twisted in complex expressions of awe. The human isn't just combining techniques, he's synthesizing entirely new combat principles. The Kulari's crystal form shattered in frustration as Jake turned their own perfection against them. "This is not possible. Our combat forms are mathematically perfect. Perfect is predictable." Jake caught the master's core crystal before it could hit the ground. Humans learned early that survival doesn't care about perfection, it cares about effectiveness. He demonstrated a simple movement that somehow incorporated the mathematical precision of the crystal dance with the raw efficiency of human combat instinct. "See, your form attacks from every angle, but it follows patterns. Humans are really good at spotting patterns. Had to be, or the tigers would have eaten us." The arena fell silent as the implications sank in. Every fight had made him stronger. Every technique he absorbed became something more in his hands. The masters had tried to exhaust him, but instead they'd given him exactly what humans do best with: stress, challenge, and the need to adapt. Master Valrix approached, their combat robes shifting in patterns of deep concern. You understand, Jake Cooper, that this demonstration will change everything. The younger students are already attempting to emulate your adaptive style. Jake grinned, his body humming with combat-enhanced awareness. Change is what humans do best, Master. Now, who's next? I'm just starting to warm up. The arena's ancient combat spirits stirred, sensing that their millennia-old techniques were about to undergo an evolution none of their creators had ever imagined possible. The Academy's deepest meditation chamber, the Void Sanctum, pulsed with otherworldly energy as Jake faced his greatest challenge yet. The Void Monks, mysterious beings who had transcended normal spacetime, floated before him in their traditional combat meditation stance. Your physical adaptability is impressive, Deathworlder. Master Cathull's voice echoed through multiple dimensions. But now you face those who have spent millennia mastering predictive combat. We do not fight the body. We fight the intent before it becomes motion. Jake stood relaxed, but his enhanced senses, gifts from countless generations of humans who survived by spotting danger before it struck, were operating at peak efficiency. He could feel the subtle shifts in the chamber's energy, the microscopic tensions that preceded action. You speak of predictive combat, Jake said, already unconsciously analyzing every possible attack angle. Humans call it something else. We call it gut instinct. The Void Monk's ethereal forms shimmered with skepticism. Gut instinct. You compare base animal intuition to our millennium of temporal combat mastery. Watch. Without warning, 3 Void Monks attacked simultaneously, their movements calculated across multiple future possibilities. Their neural blades traced lethal patterns that existed seconds before they were executed. By all their combat calculations, Jake should have been unable to defend against attacks that hadn't yet happened. But he was already moving. Impossible. Cathull's temporal form fluctuated in shock. He's countering attacks we haven't even committed to. Jake flowed through their future strikes like water, his movements guided by something deeper than conscious thought. This is how humans survived Earth's deadliest predators. We don't just react to danger, we feel it coming. Our bodies process thousands of microscopic tells. Muscle tension, air pressure changes, subtle shifts in stance. He demonstrated by countering a complex temporal strike sequence moments before Cathull had decided to execute it. Your predictive combat relies on calculating all possible futures. Human instinct cuts through the possibilities to spot the most likely threat. We had to develop this skill or die. The chamber's combat analysis systems were detecting unprecedented levels of subconscious neural activity in Jake's brain. Each motion, each response, was being processed and decided before his conscious mind even registered the threat. But our temporal calculations, one of the younger monks began. Take too long. Jake completed their thought, simultaneously avoiding a neural blade strike that would have existed 3 seconds in the future. In the time you spend calculating the perfect predictive response, a human's gut instinct has already solved the problem. He invited the monks to attack again, this time closing his eyes. The assembled masters watched in astonishment as he perfectly countered every strike, moving with an efficiency that made their calculated techniques seem slow and cumbersome. Your species evolved this capability naturally. Cathull's voice held a new note of respect. Had to. Jake opened his eyes, offering a demonstration stance. When your ancestors were weighing mathematical combat probabilities, ours were deciding in split seconds whether to fight a saber-toothed tiger or run. Make the wrong choice. You don't pass on your genes. He guided the monks through a simple exercise that humans had used for millennia. The intuitive recognition of killing intent. Feel that tension in the air before an attack. The subtle shifts in energy. Humans process these signals unconsciously. We call it reading the room or sensing danger. Your temporal calculations are trying to replicate what evolution gave us for free. The Void Monk's ethereal forms pulsed with revelation. Centuries of rigid combat calculation were being challenged by something they had dismissed as primitive. Raw survival instinct, honed to supernatural levels by Earth's merciless evolution. Perhaps, Master Cthulhu conceded, their form stabilizing. There is wisdom in what humans call gut instinct. Your species' natural predictive capabilities. They are not inferior to our temporal calculations. They are simply different. Jake smiled, feeling the familiar clarity that came with combat-heightened awareness. Different isn't always bad. Sometimes different is exactly what you need to survive. Now shall we explore how human instinct and void monk precision might work together? The chamber's ancient energies swirled with new possibilities, as if reality itself was curious to see what would emerge from this unprecedented fusion of evolved instinct and calculated combat mastery. The Academy's grand amphitheater was packed beyond capacity. Alien warriors from across the galaxy had come to witness the phenomenon that was reshaping their understanding of combat. Jake stood at its center, surrounded by a group of eager young students from dozens of species. Your traditional masters teach you to perfect each movement individually. Jake demonstrated a basic Marine Corps combat stance. Humans learned differently. We had to understand combat as a whole system, because that's how we survived. A young Serathi warrior raised all four hands. But how can we adapt without spending centuries in meditation? Our species requires. Watch this, Jake interrupted, calling up a holographic replay of standard human infantry tactics. The assembled aliens leaned forward, their various sensory organs fixed on the display. See how a human fire team moves. That wasn't developed in some sacred dojo. It evolved naturally from countless battlefield experiences. Every movement serves multiple purposes: defense, offense, and position, all at once. He demonstrated with a group of students, showing how human combat efficiency had unconsciously incorporated principles that alien civilizations had taken centuries to theorize. The amphitheater's combat analysis systems highlighted the underlying patterns that humans had intuited through pure survival necessity. Remarkable, breathed the crystalline, Quillary initiate. The movements contain the same mathematical principles as our thousand-facet formations, but without the computational overhead. Jake nodded, guiding the students through a simple CQC drill that somehow flowed more smoothly than their traditional forms. Humans don't think in terms of perfect forms or sacred stances. We think in terms of what works. Everything else is just decoration. The demonstration continued as Jake showed how human combat techniques had naturally evolved to be modular, easily combined, and adapted on the fly. Each student found their traditional training enhanced rather than replaced by this new approach. Your species developed this efficiency without quantum probability mapping, asked a young void monk, their temporal form flickering with excitement. We had better teachers. Jake pulled up more Earth footage. Watch a pack of wolves hunt. See how they move. Humans learned from everything on Earth, predator and prey alike. We had to understand combat from all angles because sometimes we were the hunters, sometimes we were the hunted. The amphitheater hummed with energy as Jake demonstrated how human martial arts had unconsciously incorporated the precision of a striking snake, the fluid grace of hunting cats, the unstoppable momentum of charging bulls, all refined by generations of practical application. But the traditional masters say, one student began. The traditional masters spent centuries perfecting single techniques in controlled conditions. Jake corrected gently. Humans had to learn combat while being chased by something that wanted to eat us. Different approaches for different needs. He guided the students through combinations that merged their species' natural advantages with human adaptive principles. The young Serathid discovered their probability manipulation worked better with fluid human footwork. The Quillary Initiate found their crystalline forms flowed more effectively when incorporating human economy of motion. This is why humans became Earth's apex predators, Jake explained, helping the struggling student adjust their stance. Not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we could learn from everything around us. Every predator that tried to eat us taught us something new. Every prey animal we hunted showed us a different way to move. The amphitheater's observation rings were now crowded with senior masters, watching as centuries of rigid tradition were not destroyed, but evolved. The younger generation was discovering something their elders had forgotten, that combat was not a static art to be preserved, but a living thing that grew and adapted. "Remember," Jake called out as the students practiced their new hybrid techniques, "there's no such thing as a perfect form. There's only what works right now, in this moment, against this opponent. That's how humans think about combat, and that's how we survived long enough to reach the stars." Master Valrix, watching from the highest observation ring, activated their personal combat analysis system. The data patterns were undeniable. The students weren't just learning new techniques, they were developing entirely new ways of thinking about combat itself. The revolution had begun, and there would be no stopping it. The Academy's Grandmasters gathered in their sacred combat arena, their combined power making reality itself shiver. Jake stood alone in the center, facing what the conservative masters considered their ultimate challenge: simultaneous defense against 7 distinct sacred combat styles. "You have corrupted our teachings long enough, Deathworlder." The crystalline Archmaster's voice rang with millennium-old authority. "Prove your worth against pure, unsullied combat art." Jake's pupils dilated, his body already analyzing the unique energy signatures of each master. "You still don't get it, do you? Humans don't prove worth through ceremony. We prove it through survival." The attack came from all directions at once. The Void Monk Grandmaster struck through 3 different time streams, while the Liquid Metal Master flowed in impossible patterns of molecular sharp edges. The Quantum Warriors attacked through probability itself, their strikes existing in multiple realities simultaneously. But Jake was smiling. "You know what humans call this kind of situation." He moved with impossible precision, each motion countering multiple attacks across different dimensions of space and time. "We call it Tuesday." His defenders watched in awe as he demonstrated why humans had dominated their death world. Each master's attack was met not with rehearsed defense, but with fluid adaptation that seemed to anticipate their movements before they began. "Observe his neural patterns," Master Valrix called from the observation ring. "He's not calculating responses, he's creating entirely new combat forms in real time." Jake's movements became a blur of deadly efficiency. Where the crystalline master's geometric attacks should have trapped him, he flowed like water. When the Quantum Warriors split reality itself, he somehow existed in the perfect defensive position across all probabilities. "This is what you don't understand about humans," Jake explained, turning the Void Monk's temporal attack back on itself. "We evolved to thrive in chaos. It's not just combat, it's survival instinct written into our DNA." The masters pressed their attack harder, their sacred techniques becoming increasingly desperate as Jake not only defended but began to counter. Each movement he made seemed to incorporate elements of their own styles, but modified, improved, evolved. "Impossible." The Liquid Metal Master surged forward. "No single being can process this many combat variables simultaneously." "We don't process them," Jake replied, using the master's own momentum to create a cascade effect that disrupted 3 other attacks. "We feel them." Humans call it being in the zone, when conscious thought steps aside and pure instinct takes over. The arena's combat analysis systems were overwhelmed trying to track the principles being demonstrated. Jake wasn't just combining techniques anymore. He was creating something entirely new. Each movement flowed naturally into the next, turning the master's perfectly calculated attacks against each other. "Your sacred forms are beautiful," he acknowledged, sliding between quantum probabilities with casual grace. "But they're rigid, predictable. Nature doesn't fight with perfect form, it fights to win." To demonstrate, he launched into a sequence that somehow merged all 7 attacking styles into something devastatingly effective. The masters found their own techniques being used in ways they had never imagined possible, enhanced by human adaptability and survival instinct. "This is why Earth's predators couldn't stop us," Jake continued, his movements becoming even more fluid as combat stress enhanced rather than degraded his performance. Every time they evolved new ways to kill us, we evolved better ways to survive. We didn't just learn combat. We became combat. The arena's ancient power responded to this truth, its energy patterns shifting to acknowledge something new. The attacking masters found themselves locked in a dance they hadn't initiated, their sacred techniques transformed into something both familiar and revolutionary. Finally, impossibly, all 7 grandmasters were neutralized in a single flowing sequence that defied their combat reality. The arena fell silent. So, Jake helped the shocked masters to their feet, showing the respect their skill deserved. Shall we discuss how your sacred arts might evolve to include human combat principles? Or would you prefer another demonstration? The masters looked at each other, their various alien physiologies showing the same expression. The recognition that combat itself had just evolved before their eyes. The perfect storm of human adaptation had changed everything. The Academy's great hall, silent for millennia, rang with the sound of unanimous acclaim. Jake stood before the assembled masters and students as Master Valrix made the historic announcement. For 10,000 years, we believed we understood the fundamental nature of combat. Their harmonics resonated through the ancient chamber. Today, we acknowledge that a species we once dismissed as primitive has shown us a new path forward. The hall's crystalline walls displayed holoprojections of Jake's demonstrations, each showing how human adaptability had transformed rigid combat forms into something more effective, more alive. Your human adaptive combat is hereby recognized as the most significant martial advancement since the founding of this academy, Master Valrix declared. But more importantly, you have taught us why humans became the apex predators of your death world. Jake stepped forward, his casual stance containing more lethal potential than the most practiced alien forms. Everything I've shown you was already there. Humans didn't create new combat principles. We discovered them through necessity. Every predator that tried to eat us, every prey we had to catch, every rival tried we faced. They all taught us something. The Void Monk Grandmaster materialized beside him, their temporal form stable with new understanding. You have shown us that true combat mastery isn't about perfecting techniques, but about perfect adaptation. Exactly, Jake gestured to the assembled students. Look at how quickly your younger warriors are progressing now that they've stopped trying to achieve perfection and started focusing on effectiveness. The hall's combat analysis systems displayed the stunning results. Students who had struggled for decades with traditional forms were now advancing rapidly, their natural abilities enhanced rather than constrained by human combat principles. But this is just the beginning, Jake continued. Humans never stop evolving our combat abilities because we never stop facing new challenges. Each generation builds on what came before, adapting and improving. Master Shvan's liquid metal form rippled with newfound respect. We have already received requests from military academies across the galaxy. They wish to send their elite warriors to train on Earth. The announcement sent a murmur through the hall. Earth, the death world that had forged humanity's combat instincts through millions of years of survival pressure, was becoming the galaxy's premier combat training ground. They'll learn a lot, Jake smiled. Earth's gravity will make them stronger. Our predators will sharpen their instincts. But most importantly, they'll learn why humans became so adaptable. He demonstrated one final sequence, showing how human combat principles could be adapted to any species' natural abilities. The crystalline warriors found their geometric precision enhanced by fluid human movement. The quantum warriors discovered their probability manipulation worked better with human intuitive targeting. Your sacred combat arts aren't being replaced, Jake assured the traditional masters. They're evolving, just like humans did, just like everything on Earth had to, or die. Master Valrix raised all 8 limbs in the ancient gesture of wisdom acknowledge. And this, perhaps, is the greatest lesson the Deathworlders have taught us. Combat is not a fixed art to be preserved, but a living thing that must grow and adapt. The hall's ancient combat spirits stirred, awakening to new possibilities as Jake addressed the next generation of warriors. Remember, humans didn't become Earth's apex predators because we were the strongest or fastest. We made it because we never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, never stopped evolving. He gestured to the galaxy visible through the hall's transparent dome. Out there are challenges none of us have ever faced. New threats, new opponents, new problems to solve. And that's exactly how humans like it. Because in chaos and challenge, we find our greatest strength, the ability to adapt and overcome. The Academy's ancient power hummed in harmony with this truth. Combat itself had evolved, transformed by the species that had survived Earth's deadliest crucible. As the ceremony concluded, Master Valrix approached Jake privately. "You have changed everything, human Jake Cooper. What happens next?" Jake's eyes held the predatory gleam of his ancestors, the ones who had survived long enough to pass on their genes. "What always happens, Master? We adapt. We evolve. We move forward. Because that's what humans do best." The stars above the Academy seemed to shine brighter, as if the galaxy itself was eager to see what would emerge from this new evolution in combat. After all, humans never stop adapting. And they never will.